Let's. Hey, bir, iki, üç, dört.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. We are waiting a few more minutes. It's like 9 in the morning, and you know that with the coordination meetings and people still trying to get to the venue, just a few more minutes for to see if other colleagues will join us. Thanks. For those of you who are here in the room already, a lot of the presentation and the interaction that we have will be through Slido. So if you already can get to the Slido app either on your phone or laptop, it will kind of save us time a little later. We will give you a code to kind of access the Slido to the questions for the questions in a bit. question and then can move on to the next one. Like at some point you can just stop it and then you go to the next one. Yeah. So give them like a minute. Oh, this time 9:06. So maybe in 3 minutes we start. Nice. Or
Yeah, but it's nice to be independent.
No, I mean it is nice. It's good. I'm very happy that everything that works out.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I think
I'm also looking forward to like being at home again.
yeah, the luxury dimensions of being alive.
For like 7, 8 hours.
Yeah, I got 5.
Yeah.
I met your colleague. Is it
Mark,
Mark?
maybe.
He's from Germany. That's what I was going to say. Maybe you have many colleagues. Marek. Yeah. Maybe it's Marek.
But actually, from like he's in the German office, like from Slovakia.
Okay, maybe
So,
that
okay.
that sounds about right. Yeah. What was I going to say?
I think we are like Europeans.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was thinking. South. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so actually just me and Martin everyone else is going out. He
Yeah.
goes basically the German office. Like, living in Germany.
But have that connection.
And then most of your university is in
Yeah. So what's the Sri Lanka connection?
So that's where Sangha was founded.
Okay.
That's the main office. So it was founded as a Sri Lankan entity. From there it came up.
So who founded it?
I
Rosita.
don't know if you've met her. She's now executive director. So originally it was founded like in 2009 as kind of a youth thing, and then it grew into like a CSO, so it's like a think tank. Maybe I'm fortunate ability to expand a bit further to Germany.
Yeah.
Able to grow. I wasn't part of it from the start.
And how did it turn out that you were in Sri Lanka? Were you in Sri Lanka and then moved into Sligo?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What's your
Exactly. So you're here in
So basically, it's a mix of. I was already kind of in consulting for Sligo first, but then also my wife is Sri Lankan.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You might. I mean, I guess there could be some reasons why you might want to, but
It is a big
I'm actually. That's the other thing I'm thinking, because we had this discussion with. I can't believe I forget her name. But anyway.
I mean, I'm not gonna.
Yeah. She was really good. But I just couldn't. I couldn't
You're
find
second.
the time to make a new thing happen outside of our programs when I'm in Sweden. We were going to kind of maybe do something with IOMs or something like that, but it just didn't feel like it was going to work. But I'm going to come anyway to visit in July next year. So yeah, I'll let you know where it goes.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. And without further delay, I would like to start off with the first session for today. We are very thankful to PCCB for giving us this opportunity to host this particular roundtable here at their Capacity Building Hub. This is the second time we have collaborated with them. As part of the agenda, sorry, I should have. So I will like to invite Mr. Mohammed Kadar, who is the Director of Governance from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, to provide a short opening remark. Absolutely. It is, sorry. It's fine. We're doing this as a round table, so it's okay. But if you want, you can also take the.
This also works. It's easier.
Yes. Thank you and good morning. So I would like to thank the organizers of this event and Somalia to be invited into this forum is also appreciated. Thank you. I think many of you may not know the situation of Somalia, but I would like to highlight some of the issues we have in terms of climate mobility. Somalia has one of the highest populations in terms of displacement globally. We have around 4 million, 3.8 million displaced people. And out of this, 2.4 million are displaced due to climate emergencies. The climate patterns in the country are unpredictable. They are frequent. Sometimes we have flooding. Sometimes we have droughts. And the climate situation is becoming very erratic and unpredictable. And this is having significant consequences for the livelihood of the people. It's affecting food security, water security, and agricultural production, which 80% of the population rely on. And all these are leading to displacement. That's why I said 2.4 million people are displaced by climate emergencies. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it was because of conflict. The majority of displacement was due to conflict. But in the last decade or so, the data we have shows that most of the people are displaced due to climate emergencies. And in addition to that, we are also suffering from environmental degradation, particularly deforestation and soil erosion and so on. So the climate emergencies and degradation of the environment are also some of the other challenges that are contributing to the displacement of the Somali population. And when we look at the Somali context in terms of human mobility, we can categorize into three categories. One is the climate emergencies, environmental degradation, and ongoing conflict. So we have prolonged conflict in the last 3 decades that has been happening in Somalia. But we also have, due to these situations, cross-border migration into neighboring countries, but also people coming to Somalia. And that is putting, of course, additional burden into the economic situation of Somalia, but also neighboring countries. So while unplanned migration brings challenges, migration is important for vulnerable communities as an adaptation strategy. And the Somali population practice nomadic life of living. They move from one place to another in search of water, pasture, grazing land for their livestock, and so on. So it has been a centuries-old way of life, and now the climate situation has exacerbated that. So the movement is becoming more frequent rather than every 5 years or so. And we see also people coming to Western countries, diaspora, and so on, but also returning. And these are also a lifeline for many people back home in Somalia, diaspora, and returning migrants are bringing remittances, but also skills. And they are opening also businesses and so on, contributing to the economy of the country. So all of these issues require integrated policies and holistic approach that recognize the link between climate change, migration, peace, and resilience building efforts. And Somalia has taken a number of or key steps or initiatives at the regional level as well as at the national level. Somalia is a signatory of the Kampala Declaration on Migration, Environment and Climate Change. Somalia has also developed national frameworks. One of them is the National Climate Change Policy 4 years ago. And this year, we have finalized the first National Adaptation Plan, NAP, which is, I think, one of the focus of this side event. And if you look at that document, it extensively addresses the issue of climate mobility. So mainstreaming human mobility migration into the National Adaptation Plan is critical to ensure that it is safe, orderly, and regular, and has positive outcome for climate change adaptation and socio-economic development. So migration in Somalia, as I said, is often seen as a strategy for adapting to climate change and acknowledging the link between climate change and migration, and subsequently understanding migration as a climate change adaptation strategy, we can create conditions to ensure that communities leverage migration as a proactive adaptation strategy. And finally, I would like to indicate that also mainstreaming migration in the NAP also helps us address the needs of both migrants as well as host communities, so that we reduce also the tensions and enhance social cohesion, economic opportunities for both the incoming of the migrants as well as the host communities. So tackling migration helps build global partnerships and brings efforts together through frameworks like the Global Compact for Migration and the Paris Agreement, promoting resilience and shared strategies for adaptation. So overall, that is what we have, or the situation in brief in Somalia in terms of addressing the issue of human mobility in the different national documents, particularly the National Adaptation Plan. So with that, I would like to thank everyone, and of course, later on, if there is any questions, I will be happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kadar. With that, I would like to invite my colleague, Sinziana Pushkash, who is the Climate Migration Senior Expert with Climate Action Division of IOM, for her opening remark.
Thank you so much, Sum, and I have to apologize on behalf of my director, who, as you can tell by my voice, her voice is even worse. So I'm here reading her remarks, and thank you so much for being with us this morning. And thank you to the PCCB for organizing a full day on climate migration this year. We are very, very excited to see this mainstreaming of migration into UNFCCC processes, and including at COP and the events that UNFCCC is planning. So thank you so much, and also thank you to Mr. Kadar for his remarks, which I found very eloquent and showing really the need for what we're going to discuss today. As Sue mentioned, we're from IOM, and we're very happy to be here with you on this event. We know that human mobility in the context of climate change adaptation is a multidimensional issue. And we know that looking at human mobility through an adaptation prism is crucial. And there are three main reasons for this. The first one is obviously climate migration might lead to displacement. When climate change gets people displaced, this often erodes their capacities to adapt. It increases their vulnerabilities. Therefore, we look at climate change adaptation to avert, minimize, and address displacement in the context of climate change, environmental degradation, and disasters. A second reason why it's important to look through this adaptation prism is that migration can actually be an adaptation capacity or an adaptation tool. We look, for example, at remittances from labor migrants that then help back their families in countries of origin or in their communities of origin to adapt. We can also look at the example of pastoralists who move with their cattle depending on the season, depending on how the weather changes, depending on the temperature, the precipitation, the pasture, and the water available to them. Or we can also look at planned evacuations or planned relocation in order to move people out of immediate risk or in the aftermath of a disaster. And the third reason why IOM is seized of this adaptation prism for human mobility is that we need to continue and amplify the engagement and the inclusion of displaced persons, migrants, and refugees in climate action, including in climate change adaptation work. We see that they usually have the solutions, they usually know exactly what needs to be done, and most of us should be around them and support them. And the work that we do here with IOM and with our partners and in UNFCCC is actually embedded in a few specific decisions of UNFCCC. And we are very proud of the 2010 Cancun Climate Change Adaptation Framework, and I hope all of you are familiar with this framework. This has established not only the NAP process, but it has also been one of the first few mentions of migration, displacement, and planned relocation in a UNFCCC official decision text. It calls to enhance understanding of these topics and what more can we do about it. Fast forwarding 8 years after, in 2018, the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage and the Task Force on Displacement proposed certain recommendations on how we can do this. So if in 2010 we saw this topic in adaptation decision, then in 2018 we saw this topic also come out in loss and damage decisions. And the TFD recommendations make a specific mention to urging parties to incorporate human mobility into national planning processes. And we are now in 2024, so a few years after this part of integrating human mobility into national adaptation planning, we are there. UNFCCC will soon launch a technical guide on integrating human mobility and climate change linkages into national planning, national climate change planning to be more specific. And this technical guide has been developed by multiple partners into the Task Force on Displacement, being led by IOM with ILO and UNHCR. But it had inputs from a lot of stakeholders, including party stakeholders, civil society researchers. It has been a 2-year process and a lot of consultations and presentations. So we are very happy that we arrive in 2024 with a technical guide that implements the recommendations from 2010, 2018 that we have had before. And this is really a milestone for our work. It is a milestone for the future of communities. It is a milestone for the commitment that we hope to see at local level as well. If I'm allowed to talk a bit about IOM as well, from the work that we have been doing in the last 7 years on this. We have been supporting member states to mainstream migration considerations into their national adaptation planning, and we're now looking into nationally determined contributions as well, for example. We have started a climate mobility for NAPS initiative, specifically to roll out this technical guide that I mentioned. And we're very happy to announce that we have been rolling out this climate mobility for NAPS initiative in over 30 countries now. And all of this is due to core funding in IOM, something called the IOM Development Fund. But we do hope that this type of rollout of the technical guide will be taken up by other stakeholders. This is a UNFCCC technical guide, so we hope it will be mainstreamed through all the other stakeholders as well. Before I end, I just want to emphasize that this is a roundtable discussion. I love speaking at a lectern. It gives me a lot of pleasure to see all the microphones, but this has to be informal. We can have a discussion, and Zoom will help us moderate this. But we really want to hear from you. We want to have a discussion with you, or where you see the priorities are. How can we do more of mainstreaming human mobility into NAPS? We kept asking, how do we include migrants? How do we include migration? And the answer has always been, make sure it's in the NAP, because then it trickles down to actual funding and activities at the country level. We're going to have an interactive format. We're going to have Slido. We're going to have a conversation here in the room. And I really want to thank the organizers and my colleagues for this session. And I look forward to engaging with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cinziana. As Cinziana mentioned, this is going to be quite an informal interaction, so I will urge you to go to the Slido app on your phone or your mobile. And as you know, there are coordination meetings and other meetings going on. So I'm just going to give the floor to our colleague Rafiq Vardiev, who is from the Environmental Sustainability Policy Department within the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources of Government of Azerbaijan. Rafiq, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I just would like to say the change of climate created many issues as well in Azerbaijan, increase of number of hydrometeorological hazards like flooding, health issues, rainfall, heat waves, etc., etc. And therefore, we developed our national adaptation plan. We were planning to do it by 2025, but because of COP29, we did it before and included many measures there, but I don't want to keep your time. Just I would like to say that one of them is Kura Delta restoration. Kura River flows into the Caspian Sea, transboundary river, passing territory of 5 countries. And in Kura Delta, population use it as a drinking water, though quality is not so good, but for some initial treatments, they use it. Unfortunately, because of climate change impact, Caspian Sea salty waters entered into Kura River for 50 kilometers upstream of the river, creating drinking water problem, increased salinity of water from 0.5 from normal to 10 gram per liter. Of course, population could not drink this water, and last year it was problem with reduction of flow of Kura River and the impact of climate change, also increase of eastern winds and waves, etc., etc. Therefore, we had this problem. Also, migration organization helped organize some study in this area, and in order to solve this problem, one of projects in our national adaptation plan is the restoration of Maza Kura. We call it Maza Kura, main Kura channel. Before it was flowing into Caspian Sea, but now it is silted. And one of pilot project is to restore it, to stop entering of this salty waters into Kura River. And I think that, of course, cooperation is very important in transboundary areas, also region-wise, to solve not only water, but other problems created under the impact of climate change. Again, thank you very much for inviting, for organizing this meeting.
Thank you, Rafiq. And I think this is important, is to get this context from different countries, and that's exactly what the technical guide is supposed to do, is help any stakeholder. And it says it's for any pen holder, any party, non-party stakeholders who is interested in mainstreaming human mobility into the national adaptation planning process. This kind of helps you to systematize how you engage with it. Once more, please have the Slido ready on your phones and on your laptop, but also at any point, if you want to make an intervention, just raise your hand and my colleagues will bring one of the microphones to you. So do not hesitate to interrupt me during any part of the moderation. So I'm moderating this, not necessarily I'm speaking here. So as I said, we will start with the first Slido exercise. We have seen this from the Working Group 2 report of the IPCC's 6th assessment. Throughout this report, they acknowledge various human mobility types, including disaster displacement, managed retreat, labor migration, planned relocation, and several, including refugee situations. We have a question for you, is that which of the following human mobility dimensions are important in your country or maybe in your work? If you can go to the Slido, also those of you who are joining us online, if you can go to the Slido, and I already see one of the participants ranking this, and I'll give you about 30-40 seconds to finish this. This is going to be the format. This is the way we are also going to introduce you to the technical guide, which we are hoping will get published sometime in December. So the evidence is quite clear. So often we hear from our interlocutors is where is the evidence? There is evidence on human mobility in the context of climate change. That is why it's in the summary for policymakers of the AR6 of the working group 2. And it's pretty nuanced text. And also, if you look through the entire 1,000+ pages of IPCC AR6 working group 2, we see a lot more nuanced text around various types of human mobility. It's not just limited to disaster displacement, but we are increasingly seeing references to a lot of other types. And this helps us to engage with multiple sectoral ministries, local governments, but also CSOs, universities and think tanks, and the private sector. I'll give you probably 5 more seconds for this, and then we'll move to the next slide. There's a session that is starting at 10:15, and we have a few slides to go through. All right. No, you can just choose multiple. All right. So you have already seen how people have kind of polled it. On this particular slide, you will see this human mobility dimension and types, which is actually now included into this technical guide that Cinziana mentioned. It's a UNFCCC forthcoming document. And this kind of showcases the kind of common understanding between parties, UN organizations, CSOs, universities, and other interlocutors who were involved in different parts of developing this particular technical guide. We had done quite a lot of piloting, including stakeholder consultations. And as you will see on this slide, there are 11 different dimensions. And specifically, I would like to bring your attention to certain things, which is actually on the bottom one, because the first 2 rows, you have always heard of these human mobility dimensions, but as you can see here, we have one dimension that is on migration and just transition. We know that just transition needs to also address the requirements of migrant workers and their families. There is a mention of trapped population. We know the immobile population is an important aspect. We also recognize during this work that there could be certain cases. Somebody, if you can get it to Paul, the microphone. We also know that in some cases, climate action interventions might lead to conditions that could lead people to be displaced, and even that gets included there. Especially this is important in case of indigenous population. And I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Paul from ILO.
Thank you very much, Sum. Since you mentioned just transition and I'm coming from ILO, I just wanted to take the opportunity to maybe just go into a little more detail on that very, very quickly, but just to really highlight that if there's one takeaway about this discussion, it's really that without decent work, it doesn't work. We need to consider the labor dimensions of all of these actually dimensions of human mobility, because if they lead to decent work outcomes, if we involve employers and workers in the discussions, then that's really critical for their success. Just to take the example of labor migration and remittances, where this is very obvious, if migrant workers are going abroad to engage, to try and send money back to engage in adaptation in their countries of origin, if they are paying huge recruitment fees and remittance costs as well, but recruitment fees, then and they've taken out loans often to do this, then they are really, a lot of money is going back, but it's not going into adaptation. So we really need to make sure that decent work is mainstream throughout this. Also, just to highlight in the context of planned relocation, this is really critical for people to not just survive, not just be moved to safety, but to be moved in such a way that they can rebuild a life of sort of dignity and value. So a lot of discussion there, but just wanted to take that opportunity since you did highlight it. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I think this is important. It's for us to keep this open mind that there will be multiple. Oh, sorry. I hope you're all right. All right. Okay. We are glad to know that you're fine. Please, no rush. I think we have to keep our open mind that there will be multiple dimensions of human mobility that you might have to address in the same community. It could also be internal and international, it cross-border. It could also have different timelines. Cinziana has already mentioned about this, why we want to mainstream human mobility into the National Adaptation Plan. These are the 3 key takeaways. That, in some cases, adaptation will help to avert and minimize disaster displacement. There are other forms of human mobility that can actually enhance climate change adaptation if enabling conditions are present. Most importantly, internally displaced persons, migrants, refugees, other migration stakeholders need to be part of adaptation planning, implementation, and monitoring. So if you have to take away 3 messages from this session, these are those 3. How did we come about designing this really long technical guide? And when it is published, you will see it's a pretty long one. We looked at the technical guide for the national adaptation plans that was developed by the Least Developed Countries Expert Group, or LEG, and they provided 4 elements. We looked at a bunch of GCF readiness proposals that were submitted by countries from different parts of the world, and we saw that we needed to align how the LEG structured the report and how the countries, when they submit the GCF proposals, are structured that between objectives, outcomes, and outputs. And this kind of structure is kind of aligned throughout the technical guide. Now, this will be easy for us to kind of better understand how the technical guide could work if we could use example of a fictitious country. And we say this is a country X that has a profile where you see that there are multiple types of migration that is present. The climate projections suggest that there would be increased drought frequency, increased precipitation variability, increased temperature, so usual things. And the impacted sectors cover both primary and secondary and tertiary sectors. You will see this particular slide come up again and again because we will try to familiarize you with the technical guide through the context of this country. So country X is formulating a national adaptation plan, and the job we have is to mainstream human mobility into that process. So the question would be, how do we do it? Through various steps. So one of the first steps that the countries do at the start of a national adaptation plan formulation process, they set up national coordination, institutional mechanisms, and other arrangements. So what steps would you take to mainstream migration into such national coordination, steering mechanism, and institutional bodies? Because at the very start of such processes, mainstreaming migration is quite useful. And for this, you will have to go back to the Slido, and you can start typing it out. It's a word cloud, so you can just type out the steps you think would be necessary to mainstream migration into the national coordination, steering mechanisms, and institutional bodies. I already see some have said use best scientific and sociocultural expertise, organize parliamentary hearings, not only migration, displacement, involve government ministries, bodies responsible also for protection. Yes, exactly. Tackle popular myths about refugees and migrants, right? I'll give you another maybe 10, 15 seconds to type this out, and then I'll show you the tools that are already there in the technical guide that will actually help you with this. Once again, the reason why we have this tool is we also understand that you will not have a climate migration expert with you at all times, and you might have very tight timelines to submit your memo, submit your input. The technical guide is a step-by-step process for anyone with any background on climate change or migration to kind of formulate necessary text or input or engage stakeholders in the process. All right, I see a lot of this is being provided by the participants here. We are also going to compile all your inputs into a report which we will share with PCCB, and this will be available. So let's switch to the next slide. Thank you. So we saw all that steps, and there are a few there are a few tools in the technical guide that will help you. There's a very specific stakeholder list. We are all familiar with stakeholder list, but this one particularly gives you a longer list, including specifying those stakeholders that are relevant to human mobility, including government and UN and CSOs. And there are also specific mentions of IDPs and refugees and migrants to be included in the stakeholder process. It also allows you to differentiate between those with whom you will engage on knowledge and others who have a more strategic role. Similarly, we know that briefings are quite important. You have to brief several different stakeholders, and there are a couple of examples on how you could create briefing points for senior people from government stakeholders, from UN organization, international organizations, to kind of brief them about why climate mobility is important in that initial briefing. Once again, we are going to go back to the Slido, and the next step that usually takes place within the National Adaptation Plan process is the National Adaptation Plan Technical Working Group tries to compile and systematize knowledge to mainstream migration, to kind of as a part of the process. So the question is, what would you do to compile and systematize knowledge to mainstream migration into country X's NAP? So once again, we are using this fictitious country to discuss about the steps. So what do you think could be essential steps to compile and systematize knowledge so that it helps to mainstream migration into the National Adaptation Plan process of country X? Once again, it's a word cloud, and you can just type your suggestions in. I already see engage with the Santiago network, UN system, city level data, engage in social dialogue, utilize AI, work across ministries. This is also the part where you can think about if there are thematic topics that are essential. Like Paul said, there's need to think about just transition and labor migration. Is there enough information about that particular topic in this country, and is that something that is necessary? Yeah, focus groups and rapid ethnographic research, yes. Glad to see the methodological things being mentioned. Cluster prioritize information and data. We have to move a bit faster, so while you put in your comments, we will move to the next slide. This is right along the direction that we hoped it would be. And this is something you have within the technical guide. There is a checklist for stock taking. A lot of times when we have started to engage with NAP stakeholders on human mobility, it seemed like people wanted to better know where the NAP process was, how many meetings they have had, who are the coordinators, and we wanted to systematize that process. So there is a checklist for stock taking. And there is also a template to undertake a situational analysis. As you have seen, 11 dimensions. Some of them might be new for stakeholders, but we also know there is a lot of knowledge that may not be published, but is there within the community of practice. And there is a situation analysis tool which helps you exactly do that. So you take these tools, either you circulate them online among your network, or in some cases you organize a workshop and do this as a group. The part of this process is also about systematizing existing knowledge and identifying gaps. And policy mapping and analysis is quite important to identify where good practices exist. There are a lot of good practices that exist within the DRR space, because there is a lot of guidance on planned evacuation and social protection in that space. And we have also found, while we have done policy exercise across sectors, there are places where we have found climate mobility related strategies and laws where we didn't think it was. So there are countries in Eastern Europe where they have laws that see migration or moving people as a tool if the air quality degrades. And often when you organize such stakeholder analysis, you are not thinking of actually bringing in the people who work on air pollution in such events. So the policy analysis is a tool to look at the knowledge gaps and the good practices, but also identify the gaps. And of course, we have the CLIM database. It has over 1,700, it's a repository of over 1,700 policy documents and could be a very good starting point for everyone. Just a reminder that we are talking about this particular context of a country, a fictitious country that is trying to develop a national adaptation plan, and we are like going through the steps on how we can help them to better mainstream migration in that process and how the technical guide could help you. One of the things is also generating evidence, and here what could help you is, sorry, probably it's more visible there. Within the guide, there are 6 examples of case studies that you can undertake. We have compiled this with help of our colleagues from Task Force on Displacement. There is an example of a study that focuses on human mobility in the context of climate change. There is one on understanding durable solutions for displaced persons. There is one on labor migration and adaptation. There is one specific one that looks into a more longitudinal collection of data. And there is one case study example on women's adaptive capacity through gender-sensitive action research. These are examples. These are based on actual research that have been undertaken by various institutions. And they are placed there so that it's easier for anybody who is interested to do research for the national adaptation plans to replicate it. Once again, we will go back to the Slido for a polling question. This is a yes and no question. So if you are supporting country X to mainstream migration into the NAP, will you look at examples from other countries that have mainstream migration into the NAP? I think it's an obvious question. And I see it's an overwhelming yes, but I'm going to find out the person who said no. Is someone crying out for attention? All right, we can actually switch back to the slide. This is an obvious answer that of course we will want to look at it. The technical guide has examples from 7 countries from different regions, including the Pacific. We have an example from Marshall Islands. We have examples from Central Asia in Uzbekistan, Eastern Europe in Moldova. We have got examples from Ethiopia and Ecuador. These are countries that have already integrated human mobility into their national adaptation plans, but in different ways. And there are details of these, details of the ways in which these countries have done it. Some have started to mainstream it from the very beginning. Others have done it somewhere in the middle. Yet there are countries who have done it at the very last stages in like the last couple of months. So there are a lot of ways of mainstreaming it. And we thought these examples would be useful. And the technical guide has details of all this for the practitioners and the government counterparts. Just a reminder that all discussion could help with a specific country example that we are using. We stay with the Slido. Now, one critical area of a national adaptation plan is countries develop sectoral adaptation plan, because the NAP coordinator, one of the main objectives of the NAP coordinator is to mainstream climate change across different development sectors. And hence they would look at engaging with sectoral ministries to mainstream climate change into this. And this is also an opportunity for human mobility expert to mainstream human mobility in such conversations. So which of these sectors do you think are important for mainstreaming migration into country X's NAPs? And I see a lot of colleagues are talking about energy, water, agriculture, food systems, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity suddenly dropped down. Okay, no, it's back. Yes. It should be all of that, true. Yeah, as Sator mentioned, it should be all of them. Right. Yes, so we switch back to the slides. And you are exactly right. So we made this list based upon a mapping of the sectors that we have seen some of the countries do. There's a lot of overlap between the sectors that countries see as important, but there are also countries that that identify unique sectors. In the technical guide, there is detailed information on how you could mainstream human mobility into these particular sectors like water, biodiversity, ecosystems and forestry, agriculture and food system, urban settlements, energy, and disaster risk reduction. So there are checklists for each of these sectors for all those 11 dimensions. So if you go through those checklists, it will first tell you what the entry points are, and then there is a checklist that will tell you on what you could think about and how you could do it. It's to guide you. It's not prescriptive. It's just to help you organize your thought, but also organize the thought, the process of your interlocutors. We'll move to Slido. So capacity building is another crucial context, and we know unless we have national expert leading this process, government, non-government, this process won't be sustainable. So what resources are what resources are available to build capacities on human mobility in the context of climate change in country X? This is a word cloud, and you can just write in if your organization has an online. Thank you. If your organization has an online or an offline training on climate mobility, you can mention this in the active poll, and I'll show you what we have in the technical guide. Thank you so much. It's okay, I'll keep it there. The capacity building is both for the sectoral entities and the local entities, and it involves everyone across the sector, including the government, CSOs, academia, the private sector, whoever you think would be relevant for. I see people are still typing. Focus on capacity building resources that are available to you on human mobility and climate change. All right. You can still continue to provide your comments, but since we are a bit short on time and just a few more slides to go, I am going to just switch to the yes, thanks. There is a sub-chapter within the technical guide that puts a list of both offline and online tools, including from IOM, NRC, and PDD, UNDRR, ILO. ILO has an e-learning course on labor migration and climate change that's on the way. So there's a list of all this with in most cases, we also have the website mentioned so that it is easier for you to access some of this. It's not an exhaustive list. But feel free to share if you know of more. Just a reminder that we are talking about mainstreaming human mobility in a specific country context. So now, UNFCCC process is one of the global policy frameworks, but human mobility in the context of climate change is also relevant to other international and regional policy frameworks, including things like the Nansen Initiative, we have the Sendai Framework, the New Urban Agenda, the SDGs. We often, and many of these global policy frameworks or the regional ones have anchor text on human mobility in the context of climate change. And it is essential that we have a coherent message on human mobility in the context of climate change as the countries or other organizations report for these global policy frameworks. And it's not easy because each of these global or regional policy frameworks, the mandate is with a different agency at the national level. So what steps would you take to promote coherence on human mobility in the context of climate change among regional policy frameworks? This is more about what steps would you take to promote coherence and not so much on what actually needs to be done. I see that now regional dialogues, Mapping analysis, exactly. Regional technical working groups, yes. These are the ones that, right. Please keep on mentioning what steps could help promote the coherence as the parties and the non-party stakeholders work on this. The technical guide has these examples. There are a couple of examples of briefing note on how to prepare briefing note for different regional frameworks. So when you talk about human mobility in the context of climate change and how the process has developed within UNFCCC, there are some examples that you can use to also relay this information to other international, regional, sub-regional policy frameworks. Once again, these are examples of how to set up things because we understand this, some of this discussion would be very national or regional specific. I think we are almost there. Monitoring and evaluation is an important part of the mainstreaming process. And once again, the question to you would be in country X, as we are trying to mainstream human mobility in the NAP of country X, what are the key steps to monitor this process? Involve all stakeholders, right? Accountability framework, true. Do we need to do anything with the outputs and outcomes at the start of a proposal development process? Because if these are not reflected in the monitoring, then the mainstreaming will be ad hoc. Yeah, strength and data gathering. Someone put in monitoring evaluation. Thank you. Right. We'll switch back to the slides to show what you have there. There is an example of how a results matrix looks. So we worked quite a lot in the last few years with monitoring and evaluation expert and project development officers, trying to figure out how a NAP, a project proposal that aims to mainstream human mobility into the national adaptation plan process should look. And it was a bit of an effort to figure out the objectives and indicators and the data sources, same at the outcome and output level. So we have an example there for you to use as a reference. It's not the only way to do it, but when we started from scratch, we found it quite a challenge, especially to formulate the outcome and objective level indicators. And we hope that these sort of examples could be useful for the practitioners. And yeah. With that, we have almost stayed on time, almost. It's a practical hands-on collection of tools that considers a broad range of human mobility. It is supposed to be applied for all stages of the NAP process. And it is for any relevant stakeholder. It's not limited to one or the other. If you have an interest in the NAP formulation process in your country or you're supporting something in another country, this is a tool you should get hold of as soon as it is published by UNFCCC. And you would also notice that the issues of social equity and justice are also referred there. We have a lot of references to cross-cutting issues and gender. Of course, we know more could be done. So if you see some good practices as you apply it, or if you develop something that is a good practice, especially on cross-cutting issues, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. It's an iterative process, and we will compile those. So with that, I'm just going to open the floor to see if anybody has a question or a remark. Anyone who would like to take a crack at... yes, Paul, please.
Sorry, I'm going to just speak on behalf very briefly of Michelle Yonatani from UNHCR, who unfortunately would have loved to join, but couldn't be here today because of some logistical issues. I think we all empathize with that. But yeah, just to really emphasize UNHCR's real commitment to this process as well, as a member of the UN for NAPS and a forthcoming member of the Santiago networks. And so, again, sending her apologies, but reinforcing UNHCR's commitment in this regard. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for relaying the message from Michelle, who has also been quite key in this process. Anyone who wants to share their feedback. Any comments at this stage? I see Sator has his hands up, so. I hope this is not your closing remark, because that comes later. Okay. Anyone who wants to take a crack at this, like, it's really helpful, it's not helpful. I have no idea what this is. Everything is fine. All right. Since I see people are still digesting what it is, yes, thanks.
Hi, I'm Matthew Scott from the Raoul Wallenberg Institute. Of course, this is helpful. This is a fantastic set of initiatives that really help to integrate human mobility into the NAP process. I think probably all of us are looking forward to seeing the technical guide. And I'm not sure I heard when we can expect it to be available. Not to put any pressure on the deadlines, but it seems like a great innovation that can provide really pragmatic, systematic support. And I think that's a point that I've reflected on a bit, because there's different actors in different countries and different processes to develop the NAPs. To have a standardized guide that addresses this dimension in a way that's accessible to different countries at different levels of developing NAPs and expertise. It seems like it'll be a really valuable tool. When can we get it?
Thanks. I knew we were going to get this question. We were trying our best to have this already. I mean, we were trying our best and hoping that this would be published by UNFCCC just before this COP, but unfortunately, they have a headwind of so many things going on. I know you understand how it is. The document is with the editors, the outline is done, so we're hoping that this will be published before Christmas. They just need a bit of time and a break from all this to look through it and publish it, but very soon. Yeah, yes. Yes. So, please.
Yeah, this is absolutely fantastic, but it's very technological, technical. Ultimately, these are questions that are ultimately exceedingly political,
yes,
social, etc. How does that get into the into the guidelines, if possible?
Thanks for the question. I know we're also running short of time, so before I hand over the floor, I'll just take like 30 seconds to that. Over 3 years, we piloted the draft technical guides all across. We spoke to government counterparts, including like sectoral ministries from various countries, local government experts, brought them to workshops. We also spoke to CSOs and others. A lot of academics were involved. It was also open for review, so we got a lot of reviews also from different colleagues. So we're hoping that it kind of integrates, it finds to find a midpoint that tries to bring together sometimes these ideas that are not always in one direction. The guide is also always available to everyone, so we hope that people who will use this guide will look through it and take this to all those consultations and the NAP technical working group meetings and say, I know this could be done in this way because here are some guidance on it, and this will help them to better articulate and advocate for what they want. I mean, of course, I acknowledge that at the end of the day, it's a political process, but we're hoping that being able to systematize the knowledge, create the community of practice would help them advocate better. And with that, the last thing on our agenda is the closing remark, for which I would invite Sator Saidov, our colleague from the Agency of Hydrometeorology, from the Committee for Environmental Protection, Government of Republic of Tajikistan, and they have been very supportive of us during this whole process. Sator.
Thank you. Thank you for giving an opportunity to do the closing remarks. Thanks the IOM and the Somali government for organizing this event. It was very interactive. I want a little bit to tell you about my country, about the situation of the NAP and this human mobility process. Yes, as Som mentioned, one of the important things is to establish the technical working group. We already have this in NAP, and also we are working with the Tajik office of IOM. We also have the technical group for National Strategy for Adaptation to Climate Change. Me, myself, I'm very waiting for this guideline tool from the IPCC that will be near to January or near to December. I'm ready to promote it in the Republic of Tajikistan. In the Republic of Tajikistan, we have many kind of migration, this pastoralism, this underboard migration, 6 kind of migration. We have partly migration, and I'm ready to use this tool for putting the migration questions into NEP. In our country, the UNDP is doing the NEP. I think they will finish in 2025. They are just finalizing the document, and we can start to do our work with this guideline. I'm working for it. I'm ready to promote it in Tajikistan. In the Republic of Tajikistan, as I said, we are very sensitive to the climate change. So many kind of economic sectors are involved in this climate change issues as energy, agriculture, the transport sector, water sector. Of course, cross-cutting, we mentioned that migration is also a cross-sector in our development documents, in the national adaptation strategy. The migration is also put as part of the question that should be solved. So these kind of things happen in the country. We are so happy to work with IM. We made different kind of side events in different, not only in COP29, also in Central Asia Conference for Climate Change. And next year we will have the international big conference in the field of glaciers. If the glacier will melt, the whole Tajikistan will be, should be to move somewhere. Actually, we don't know where we will move. If we go to the west, there is China. There is already 1.5 billion of people. If we look to the west, there is already deserts like you can see in Uzbekistan, in Iraq. So where we will go, I don't know. So we should think about this. In this case, the Republic of Tajikistan during the big international conference on preservation of glaciers in May 2025, and we managed to declare the International Day for preserving the glaciers. From 2025, the 21st March will be the International Day for glaciers. So in this condition, we are inviting all of you to visit Tajikistan. I hope we have some good experience because we are a mountainous country. We are very sensitive to climate change. We have 4 climatic zones in Tajikistan. So all kind of hazards are happening. I'm so happy that you are showing our women that you just finished one project that near to 500 householders were involved in this. In our technical working group, also NGOs are involved. So we are knowing that NGOs are very important in this case because they are doing the good practice. We are the government organization. We are doing the strategies. We are doing the policy. We are doing how it should be. But NGOs are the practice people that are doing the exact what we are saying. And in our case, in most part of the villages, women are responsible for the harvesting, for the looking after the house. And thanks to IM with the project, they involved more than 500 householders and women in the question of climate change. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank to all of you. I hope I will see some of you in Tajikistan in 2025.